Welcome to Earshot English. The big reshuffle of the Modi cabinet has just taken place. Some big names have been dropped, and we have some surprise entries. Now, is this reshuffle a big reset before the UP elections next year? Is this a reset after the battling of the corona crisis that the Modi government has been trying very hard to, battle in the last 1 year? And is this a reset ahead of the 2024 big elections? Why is that we have newer faces in ministries like the law ministry, the IT ministry, the health ministry? Is this a signal of the failure of the government? Or is the government trying something new? Is this experimental? What are we doing? We are going to discuss that with two very senior reporters. We have with us on our show Mr. Rashid Kidwai, a veteran reporter who has, reported on the corridors of power for decades. We also have with us Mr. Nagendra Sharma. He's executive editor of Earshot. So, to start the question, to start this discussion, we would first like to understand, Mr. Kidwai, I'd start with you. Do you feel that this big reshuffle is keeping in mind the UP elections that come in the next year?
Thank you, Amrita. I think first and foremost, any attempt to expand or reshuffle the Council of Ministers has many, I would say multiple implications. At the one hand, the government wants to keep its kind of image intact, work at progress, face future political battles, and reward talent, look after all those political exigencies that are there. So it's there is no single objective, and I think this government is the first major reshuffle after it returned to power in 2019. So this was a significant exercise, some kind of stock taking. But what we saw today, what we saw during the cabinet expansion was very revealing. Generally, it was Brad Narendra Modi that was doing wonders. Mr. Modi was instrumental in making BJP win in 2014, in 2019. So it was Brad Modi that was helping the party and its allies and everyone. Suddenly, we saw that there is a change in that perception. The many smaller brands are being courted. They were brought in, like talent, caste, smaller parties, etc. So somewhere Modi government showed a degree of vulnerability also.
Yes, sir. I'd like to move to Nagendra sir and ask him this one question. There's this understanding amongst a section of people who believe that somewhere this is seen as a passing of the blame. Do you agree to that?
See, I actually pick up from what Rashid has said. See, reshuffles don't have any single motive. So reshuffles are done keeping many things in mind. So before we move further, look at this reshuffle. This reshuffle has come at a time when Modi government has come out of the second COVID wave, which was deadly, which was not anticipated, which has wreaked havoc across the country. So if you look at the new entrants, or if you look at those who have been dropped, so ministries which have been lock, stock, and barrel changed. Health, you have seen the chemical and fertilizers minister go. So what happens is, see, reshuffles, they actually fulfill many motives. You try to change the narrative. Governments, they come up with many theories, with many things that now, as you were yourself saying, that UP elections are coming. If you look at the ministers who have come in, yes, another kind of narrative has been tried to build, that a large chunk of OBC ministers are there. Then what you also do, what happened in, I would like to go back in NDA one, the reshuffle that had happened, you had seen technocrats coming in. You had seen Hardeep Puri come in, you had seen R.K. Singh come in, you had seen Alphonse come in. And see, this reshuffle is actually a mega reshuffle. If you go back to UPA days, Manmohan Singh government in 2006 in UPA 1, And then in UPA 2 in 2012, those reshuffles were also very big. Entries of 19 and 17 ministers that taken place. Here the new entrants are about 36. So, there is not a single answer. You can't put it in a single compartment that this reshuffle will achieve this. This government has 3 years to go. You have brought in younger ministers. So what I see that it is a narrative changing exercise from COVID second wave to the problem that the government is facing with social media. That is perhaps the only explanation I can draw for the dropping of Ravi Shankar Prasad and Prakash Javadekar. So basically, as Rashid was saying, I agree there that this government is largely brand Modi government. So whatever the reshuffle achieves or what is being sought to be achieved will be known in coming days. But I don't think that there is a single motive. There is a single motive which can be said that reshuffle has been done for this, Amrita.
Okay. You've said that this is a narrative changing exercise. So, I mean, if you look at just the pure numbers, I'd like to ask this question to Mr. Kidwai. If you look at just the pure numbers, we see that about 27 faces in the Modi's Council of Ministers are OBCs, and we know that this in this particular reshuffle, we've had more women faces come in. Some of them are quite unexpected. So, just looking at these numbers, what would you say are these numbers saying? Is he reaching out to is he trying to reach out to newer sets of vote banks?
Amrita, I think this is a kind of a bit rich narration, elitist. It's a kind of government wants to sell this line, this kind of spin. Let's take one by one. We say that, more women have come, extremely welcoming. Out of 77, 11, I mean, they are 50%. All political parties, including the BJP, are committed to 33% reservation of women in all, elected bodies of the country. So why not 33%? I mean, if you really want to, show the way and actually empower women, then they should be ideally 50%. If they are not 50%, then 33%. This kind of 11 out of 77 is not a significant figure. You can always argue that perhaps it's tad better than UPA or the earlier Modi regime, but still a lot needs to be done. See, we give lot of weightage to that kind of caste, that the kind of backward community leaders who have been brought in. What about that exit? Out of those 13 ministers who were dropped, they also had caste identity. I remember, and Nagendra would perhaps vouch for it, that 2 years ago when the cabinet was sworn in, there was one person from Odisha, Pratap Sarangi, and there was a lot of hype that he was living in a mud house, he was poorest of the poor, he was really man who had ears to the ground. Why was he dropped? Babul Supriyo, young face, a very, I would say, a very middle class, upper middle class, a man with a mass reach. This Debashiri Chaudhary, why were they dropped? So they were also young, but I'm not indulging in too much of criticism. All I'm saying, this hype is, slightly misplaced when we say so many caste leaders have come in, so many, the average age of council of ministers has gone down. Ultimately, Amrita, it's a very simple litmus test. What was I in 2014? What was I in 2019? And what am I today? Am I economically, socially, politically better off? That's what average voter wants to know. And if the delivery mechanism is better, if somebody was earning 500 rupees and now earning 800 rupees, it's a happy state of mind. But if somebody was earning 500 rupees and stagnant, perhaps Nagendra can comment what it would mean, or a fall of 100 rupees for a daily wage earner.
In what you said in the last time, Nagendra, you said that perhaps the government wants to change a bit of the narrative on what it is doing on social media, and we know that the social media minister, the person who took on Twitter on behalf of the government, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, was let go of not just one but two ministries. In his place, we have a retired IS officer from Orissa who was a Rajya Sabha MP, who's been made a Rajya Sabha MP from the state. And on his first day in office, he has sent out a warning to Twitter saying that the law of the land is supreme and that Twitter needs to play by the rules of the government of India. So, I mean, what do you foresee for this? What do you foresee in this big tech versus Indian government tug of war that keeps on happening every now and then?
See, I don't think that the government's line in its tug of war against the big tech is going to change at all. See, the line is very clear. And even today, right now, as we speak, shortly before this, Delhi High Court has told Twitter that you are, if you are not following the law, then center is free to take action. Center will take action. We are not going to give you any protection. See, what is happening in the fight against big tech is now what is happening is that I feel, this is my view, that the Narendra Modi government has been successful in driving a wedge amongst these companies. See, all other companies have fallen in line, and Twitter seems to be taking somewhat of a, if I may say so, a wishy-washy line. So, see, this struggle will go on, and what you have said, the new IT minister has simply reiterated what his predecessor was saying, right? But what has happened is what I feel, that in this tussle against big tech and in this entire new OTT rules and the revision, probably the way the topmost, the powers that be in Modi government wanted this matter to be handled, the two ministers who were primarily responsible have, actually, they generated a negative narrative against the government. See, government wants an issue to be settled. The head of the government will tell you that, this issue is to be settled, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with the concerned minister, where probably the handling was not to the expectations. And, also, at a time when government has just come out of the, not come out, just say that, the COVID second wave is probably behind the country. We cannot say because, this virus has been behaving in a manner nobody anticipated the second wave, and the way courts came down, the way many high courts, and the way ultimately Supreme Court, from vaccination to oxygen shortage, everything. So, what has happened is that no government would like that, first, you are handling a pandemic, which actually went out of hand. And then, this fight against big tech, what I feel, my feeling, my perception is that probably the top level in the government wanted it to be handled but handled in a more deft manner. This is what I feel.
Mr. Kidwai, we know that there are new faces. We know that somewhere this rejig is also keeping in mind the big elections that are coming ahead of us, the Punjab elections, the UP elections, and everything that follows after that. How do you think this reshuffle or this rejig will pan out for the opposition space, especially for the Congress, which is trying very hard to have something done in UP?
I think to link the cabinet expansion and reshuffle to state elections is a bit of a always. It's not about you. It's a bit of an exaggeration. We read too much. Actually, as Nagendra would vouch, you see, generally assembly elections are fought on a local issues, local leadership things and all, and they are fairly complicated. For instance, you look at Punjab, where you see the BJP has, as things stand, is nowhere in race for victory or to for that matter from the government. Of course, in Uttarakhand, it's a kind of mixed bag. The BJP is in power, but it's on the decline. This expansion, one Nishant going there, one Ajay Bhatt coming there, is not going to make material difference on the ground level
in
situation.
Uttarakhand, where BJP is the main party as of today.
Yeah, in spite of being a main party, but you see, it is not a one exit of the education minister and the entry of Ajay Bhatt is not going to make a drastic change, because ultimately the BJP needs to explain why it had to change three chief ministers, and of course the level of Congress preparedness, the presence of Aam Aadmi Party, how it will pan out. All these things are there. The point I'm making is very simple. The state elections are far too complicated to be guided by this kind of expansion or so. If that was so, then it would have been very easy. Of course, some attempt is there. See, Amrita, we must remember this kind of coming round of four elections is, all the four states have a unique, political equations and political leadership, etc. UP is, of course, far more complicated, but I think the Congress is not in the race, just as the BJP is not in the race in Punjab. So this kind of thing, we need to look at it in a more clinical manner.
Okay.
Yes, and Amrita, I would like to. Yes, Abhijit has joined us. I just briefly, also, actually, I agree with Rashid. See, reshuffles are more of media exercises. The excitement that you see in newsrooms on the day of the reshuffle or expansion is far more. See, at the end of the day, a common man, a voter, or those who are not too much into opinion made, they're not actually really concerned. See, if a resignation is happening due to a corruption scam, that's a different thing. You need a replacement. But if a government is carrying out an exercise, a midterm exercise or something that is more to do with government functioning, and actually it has become a habit to link it too much to elections, or what impact will it have in this election or that election, that actually doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, I wanted to pose a second question to Abhijit, but then he's somehow seemed to have dropped from the conversation. So I want to ask this other question to you, Nagendra sir.
Yes.
We have a new law minister, and we've had a law minister who's been at the helm for so long, and we have a law minister who comes from a very unlikely background when it comes to law. But that's again, their rigor for everything that the Modi government stands for. You do not have too many domain experts on certain things. You might be expecting whoever person has a domain expertise on, you might not, see him in that ministry. So how do you read the elevation of Kiran Rijiju as the law minister? What do you think pans out for the law space? I mean, the legal space.
Look,
or the judiciary?
More than the portfolio, the elevation of Kiran Rijiju, I think BJP is already now getting well entrenched in Northeast, which probably you know better than me. So far, so elevation that is concerned, a young minister who has been doing well, I'm talking vis-a-vis the BJP politics. See, law ministry is actually different from all other ministries. And the jury is still out. My experience has been that domain expertise in law is misplaced. If you look at post-independence India, there are only 3 individuals who have completed a 5-year tenure in law ministry. And Amrita, from the legendary Ashok Sen to HR Gokhale to HR Bharadwaj, I don't except Ashok Sen, yes, was an exception. So there hasn't been, and I'll give you a very recent example. In UPA 2, you had domain experts from Ashwini Kumar, a designated senior advocate in Supreme Court, to Kapil Sibbal, one of the top lawyers of the country. So UPA 2 saw 4 law ministers in 5 years. So I don't think an elevation of a minister, because see, my opinion is that domain expertise in so far as ministries in India, Rashid can tell better, and Abhijit can also say whether I'm right or wrong. I don't think that so far as ministry functioning is concerned, for a minister, for a political head of a department, you need domain expert. It works, but I think jury is still out. There is no conclusive evidence or experience to show that domain experts have done well in ministries.
Okay, so we are joined by Earshot Editor-in-Chief Abhijit Majumdar. So Abhijit, the first question I wanted to ask you is, we have a new ministry with us this term. It is called the Ministry of Cooperation, and the Home Minister is heading it. Can you shed us a bit of light on what to expect going ahead with this ministry?
It's ironically named, no? For Amit Shah. It should have been named Ministry of Cooperate or else. Kind of, but no, this is about cooperatives. And, from what we understand, it is probably to pit, somebody against the likes of Sharad Pawar, who are stalwarts of the cooperative movement, who are deeply entrenched. And you see a lot of money from cooperatives go into funding of a lot of state parties and governments. So I think this is one of the government's, it's a strategic move to cut off that funding to the regional parties, to state parties, and where BJP centrally has a lot more say. And this is not just funding. Funding is probably the most important factor in this, but it's also control over cooperatives, over the entire sort of population that depends on cooperatives, and which when you have control over those cooperatives, it's also a kind of you build a vote base out there. So in states like Maharashtra, I suppose Punjab, Rashid, in MP also there are a fair bit of cooperatives.
Yes, there is a cooperative movement.
Andhra, Telangana, so this may hurt people like Jagan, of course, Mr. Sharad Pawar, it'll be very, very difficult to dislodge him, or but yeah, they are going to challenge him definitely. They will bring in something. So I think it is of extreme importance, which is why Amit Shah has been given the charge of it. Um, they have something in mind for the future.
Some big names in the Modi cabinet, in the previous Modi cabinet, have been asked, have been shown the door. Some really big names which we have seen been at the helm since the first since 2014 have been let go. So I mean, either they have been accommodated as like as governors somewhere, or they do not have any portfolio anymore. Do you think that this can lead to a significant amount of heartburn inside BJP? Do you think that there is going to be some sort of a pushback at some point, even if it is not from within internally BJP politics, but also maybe perhaps from voters of those people? Do you agree with that?
I think heartburn in the BJP started right from the fact, from the time Mr. Modi moved to
Took over.
Delhi. It was like, it's like a nuclear bomb dropped in the party. So I don't think Modi or Amit Shah thinks too much about heartburn or anything. These things are decided based on trust more than merit, is my understanding. Nagendra is right when he says that these are, you don't have to be a domain expert to be a minister. But yesterday I was listening to Rashid in one of the shows, and he is right in saying that it is how much do the ministers really matter? In the decision making, one can, BJP spokespersons, BJP's this thing could be, the entire communication, maybe that, these people are in charge of these things, but internally, uh, I suspect that, pretty much there's a very, very strong control of the PMO over
PMO.
everything.
Okay.
Every single little ministry or department, PMO has a fair bit of control. So the two cabinet berths that matter are the Prime Minister and HM. Beyond that, we journalists could get excited about
Only speculate.
these things, but it's part of a continuum. But having said that, I just want to add a little thing, Amrita, that Mr. Modi has, say, 3 years at the least, and maybe 3 to 4 years more.
Yeah, at least 3 years in the current term.
A current term, and
Before
if he wins the next election, then another. There is talk that he may pass on the that baton in the through the middle of the next term to somebody else. So he has a certain limited number of years to leave a legacy, and a person like Mr. Modi doesn't think of himself as just another Prime Minister of India. He would want to leave a legacy which is sort of good or bad, whether we like it or not. He wants to leave a very, very long, enduring legacy. Much of it is maybe actually irreversible. So he would like a team around him. This the final run of, say, 3 to 5 years. He would want a team which kind of delivers that, makes way for that legacy. So how we remember or how we look back at Narendra Modi 30 years from now will depend on what also is done in the next few years, 3 to 5 years, 3 to 7 years. So which is why also he would want people he can trust. So trust is of a very high, has a very high premium, especially with leaders who are their own people. Mrs. Gandhi, for instance, Rashid would be able to tell us much more about her. way of functioning. I mean, she would have people who can just carry through her vision. कि उतना ज्यादा सोचने का नहीं है, तुमको जो बोला जा रहा है करो बस. This is what I think.
Uh, so Rashid, what I wanted to ask you that yesterday we saw Jyotiraditya Scindia take over, the Civil Aviation Ministry, a very plum portfolio in this cabinet,
Amrita,
and
which incidentally his father held at one point.
held at one point, yes, which is also quite interesting to note. So he's taken on the Civil Aviation Ministry. He's delivered MP for the BJP, and he's not the one person to lead. He's also, I mean, we can agree that he is one of the most high-profile Congress leaders who has left Rahul Gandhi's side to be part of the Modi cabinet. But we also know that he's not going. He's not the last. He's not going to be the last. So when you see someone like Scindia taking on, I mean, getting such a good reward, so as to speak, and you also have the likes of Mr. Himanta Vishwa Sharma in Assam. Do you think that it makes it difficult for Congress to stop the flow of the attrition, of people leaving the party?
Yes, I think Amrita, of course, it's a very difficult time for the Congress, and these are all privately in their conversation. They look at Scindia as a success story, and so is this about Hemanta Biswa Sarma also. But fact of the matter is that this kind of import, I mean, from one political party to another, this is actually it cannot be done at a wholesale manner. It is to be individual. There is just one Jyotirtha Scindia, as there was one for the Northeast, there was one Hemanta Biswa Sarma, and probably there will be 4, 5 more leaders in the present day Congress, which the BJP would eye with interest and attraction. It cannot get that, everyone in the Congress Working Committee or the G23 or so in the because then BJP will develop its own problem. See, political loyalty is very transactional. It is linked to electoral success. Uh, it would amuse both Abhijit and Nagendra that the man who had coined this term that India is Indra and Indra and India is Indra, the Devkant Barua.
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Barua made all that. We all remember him, but very few of us remember that by the time in later part of 1977 and beginning of 78, when Shah Commission of Inquiry was probing against Indira Gandhi, Mr. Devkant Barua made appearance there and deposed against Indira
Yes.
Gandhi.
Yes.
So no one remembers. Many people, VC Shukla, who was all those faces of emergency, Ambika Sodi, they all left the Congress. So this is something that needs to be kept in mind. I was very much, I mean, Abhijit actually set me thinking when he was talking about, number two and this, the fact that maybe there would be some time in 2027, 28, there can be some kind of transaction and leadership. I tell you, as a humble reporter, I can tell you, you see, politics is far too complicated to be guided by a script. And why I'm saying, and that is why I'm saying, because I am among friends and among people who understand politics, not only Amrita, you, but Nagendra and as well Abhijit. There should be actually a program or maybe perhaps even a book focusing on number twos. Number twos have never made it. Okay, whether it was YB Chavan,
That's a
Sharad Pawar,
wonderful
Balkrishna
observation.
Advani,
Yes. Yes.
everywhere, or even in the states.
Yeah.
See, Pranab Mukherjee, nobody, no number two has ever made it, or even in the British
Sardar
Parliament, etc.
Sardar Patel.
Sardar Patel. So you can go on. So whether, I mean, I wish well for all the
Devilal.
contenders, but they will all, I'm saying, I mean, wish to all those, the number twos at the center and the state. But this is something that needs to be, how it pans out.
A harsh fact that has to be kept in mind.
Keep it in mind.
The historical fact.
Since we were, just a while ago, since we were talking about the role of the PMO, so Naginda, I want to ask you this question: do you think that the PMO beat, as I mean, I'm just speaking from a very journalistic point of view, when we say the PMO beat, something that reporters look forward to, do you think the PMO beat is now subsuming other beats? Because when you say a particular ministry, or you say a bit of a reshuffle, I don't think so that inside the BJP or inside politics at large, governance, too many people get it right, because that's how the flow of information has been in this in the Modi cabinet, the first one and the second. How do you see journalistically the PMO beat and its role in terms of deciding what gets out in terms of information? I mean,
Okay, so
keeping in mind the fact that we have Anurag Thakur as the new INB minister.
see, so far as what you're talking about, PMO beat for journalists. See, PMO beat has always subsumed into other ministries. Abhijit and Rashid will testify to this fact. See, PMO beat for journalists, I'm dividing your question into two. PMO beat has always been very important, and journalistically, it is done by senior people. Now you're saying that Modi government, yes, the perception is that this government, which is actually whatever information, flow of information you said, whatever comes out, that it is a fact that it is a very strong PMO run government. What Abhijit was hinting to, that reshuffle and all we are talking about, but how much ministers actually get to do, or how much kind of. But remember one thing, Amrita, that even in the so-called, when the concentration of power lies somewhere else. I'm referring to Manmohan Singh government. The PMO beat and the PMO, that thing was always important. Now coming to the real thing of governance. See, beat and information coming out, that is only one part of governance. And that is actually not government's headache. That is headache of media persons. That is actually the craft of the journalist, right? Now, so far as governance is concerned, look, there has to be, yes, it is a council of ministers. That is what your constitution says. But practically, from Nehru days, you see, it is ultimately the PMO which runs the government. You may have experience. I leave out stray examples. I'm leaving out stray examples of, say, a VP Singh government, short-lived governments, a VP Singh government, or a Devagowda government, or for that matter, Indra Kumar Gujral government. But otherwise, look, the government, the governance power has to be concentrated somewhere if you are to run a government, right? So that has to flow from the PMO. Yes, if you have experienced ministers, you had Sharad Pawar at the center in many tenures. He was defense minister, though he held a low-profile portfolio in UPA. He was only the agriculture minister. So therefore, you see, the government runs from PMO. Information flow, see, now we are talking of information flow, what role of information broadcasting minister. See, let's be very clear, when you have a strong leader, so ultimately everything flows from there. Your role, your domain, everything is cut out. That is how I feel.
Okay, now I'm going to the last round of questions. I want to start with you, Abhijita. Can you tell us who are the people you are looking forward to in this cabinet?
Anurag Thakur.
The new faces. I mean, what would you...
Ashwini Vaishnav. Because Ashwini Vaishnav for me is a bit of an unknown quantity. I mean, from what I learned, he has been Mr. Modi's friend for a long time.
2 decades.
2 decades, he has been his friend. And this is a unbelievably, what do you call it, lateral entry. I mean, it's like a complete wild card. Nobody thought that somebody would come into the Council of Ministers or cabinet with 2 massive portfolios.
Probably he even trips External Affairs Minister Jaishankar. He was a completely surprise lateral entry, but that was actually domain expertise.
And I'll be watching with great trepidation health. I'm, that is something we need to see. I mean, what was on the government's mind or the Prime Minister's mind when he put
Mansukh
Mandavia there, and with the chemicals, fertilizers, and it has pharmaceuticals also, chemicals and fertilizers, that portfolio, which is a bit contiguous. Understand also what Dharmendra Pradhan is going to do with education. There are a lot of, and of course, what Amit Shah is going to do with
cooperation. Yes, Mandavia's deputy, I mean, the Minister of State at Mandavia is this lady called Bharti Pawar. She comes from Maharashtra, and I think she's also something we can look forward to, because she is not run of the mill. She doesn't look like she's run of the mill at all. We've never heard of her. So, Mr. Kidwai, can you tell us who are the people you are looking forward to in this ministry?
No, I'll keep it simple. I think I was looking for somebody some lateral entry, not somebody who has already been in parliament or so, but outside to manage economy. Not necessarily just please don't think I'm targeting the finance minister, but in some capacity to provide, because these are extraordinary situation. We have
Yes.
seen how, you see, finance, or for that matter, dealing with money and resources, it requires a very kind of, domain expertise. There was a time when all this Narendra Tiwaris and Pranab Mukherjees and all could manage, finance ministry. But we saw in UPA how badly placed Pranab Mukherjee was there, in spite of having a very big name and a kind of towering personality and all
And there was
that.
a
But
massive tussle with Chidambaram.
Chidambaram. And the thing is that perhaps he did not understand, the new economy and that all the retro tax fiasco, etc. So perhaps I was perhaps looking at, some prominent banker or somebody outside
Somebody
the
like a
government
MV
to
Kamath.
come in and provide much needed push, because ultimately it is economy that is going to affect everyone, me, you, person on the street, entire person. We all say, see, politically we are well placed, we are mature, we know, I mean, the democracy is well trained, but I think it is that economic area where we are not fully developed. We can go on claiming that, we are next to this and all, but in real terms, because all of us have roots in society, we know what is the situation in villages, small towns, etc., or even in cities, some of the slums and all. So a lot needs to be done. I am not putting a blame on Narendra Modi or so that he has not done. Perhaps he inherited such a thing. But then you cannot just, if you are 7 years in governance, you cannot go on, just criticizing Nehru or Indira Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi or Manmohan Singh.
I agree with Rashid. I'll just make a interjection, Amrita. If you notice China's incredible rise into a superpower,
Yes.
it started not with Mao but with Deng, who completely transformed the economy. And there were two big two big pillars that propelled China's rise. One was economy, and the other was defense. So, economy is very, very important. If Mr. Modi wants to leave a completely sort of legacy, a very, very deep legacy, then
Yes.
economy is something that he has to fix.
Okay. Okay. Nagendra sir, please tell us who are the people you are going to look forward to in this cabinet.
Look, if you look at 7 years of Narendra Modi government, apart from other things, one may agree with the decision, disagree, but the biggest thing, the biggest quality that has been injected is surprise.
Yes.
Surprise is the key element of Modi government, which keeps you guessing. So, I would wait for the surprise package. Though some ministers appear to be really interesting. I would also go with the railway and the IT minister. I would also keenly watch health and education. But let me be very clear that it is the PMO and the Home Ministry that matter, right? And
And
I would wait for the surprise package, because according to me, the biggest quality, or I would say element, is surprise. So let's wait for the surprise package.
Okay. Thank you so much for being part of today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amrita. Thanks.
Thank you.
सॉरी सर,
अरे नहीं सर,
कैसा गया?
बढ़िया सर, अच्छा नहीं लगा।
बोरिंग तो नहीं था?
नहीं सर,